Hello and good evening. Kamusta kayo mga ka-Arky? And welcome sa isa na namang live stream dito sa ating ah, YouTube channel. So, good evening everyone. And as you can see, marami kami ngayon, no? Hello. Hello Renzi, hello Marion. And I hope ay okay kayo. Hello Jendi and of course
Hi.
Dexter and Zaid. Ayan. So, Renzi, kamusta?
Hello.
Yes,
Hi, everyone.
I'm good. Ito, okay yung background natin. Iba naman dahil magulo yung kwarto. So, umanggulo lang tayo ng konti. But yeah, I'm good and I'm happy that everybody's well, good, and of course, looking happy.
All right. Marion, kamusta?
Hello mga ka-Arky. Hello Sir Fitz, Sir Renzi, Jendi, and to our guests. Ito, mabuti naman at unahan ko na kayong lahat by greeting everyone Merry Christmas. December na,
Advance.
kalain nyo yun. Oo. And ayun, same pa rin naman dito. Kulay puti pa rin ang aking background. Tingnan natin next year, gawin kong pink yan.
Nako. How are you, Jendi? Kamusta dyan sa inyo?
Okay naman po, yes. So, new background din. So, Christmas background already. Ayan. So, hopefully, mas masayang Christmas for everybody. Ayan.
All right. So, of course, we have a special live stream today. We're going to talk about responsible investing. And that's the reason why we have two special guests this evening, Dexter and Zaid. So, of course, sa mga ka-arky natin, you already know Dexter. Suki natin dito. How are you, Dexter?
Naman.
Hi, Fitz. Hi, Renzi. Hi, everyone. Doing well. Ito. Masyadong busy, as you well know. Patapos ng taon. So, a lot of things to finish, strategy for next year. But good thing it's now Christmas, right? Merry Christmas. So, I'm really happy that we get to have this catch up again after few months back we had our session.
Yes.
So nice to see you again, guys.
Hello, Zaid. How are you?
Yes, very good.
Where are you
very
right
well,
now?
thank you. I'm in Hong Kong, so I'm calling from Hong Kong.
All right. How is it there?
It's getting a bit cooler. It's nice. Actually, outside the office, they just built like a Christmas market. So all day I've been listening to karaoke. Yeah, very difficult to work. I'm sure there's some. I know that Filipinos love karaoke, right? So maybe we could do some later today.
Wow, sure.
Yeah. I was just telling my gym coach that, you know what, one good indicator of the opening up of the Philippine economy is the karaoke bars. So if you hear karaoke bars opening and the Filipinos belching it out, then the economy is already opened up. But yeah, sa mga ka-arky natin, yes, we have our special guest for this evening. Okay. Medyo magna-nosebleed tayo kasi mag-English tayo for the night, no?
Yeah.
So,
but why don't you formally introduce them, Renzi? Sino ba si Zaid and Dexter?
Mm-hmm. Right. So for tonight, mga ka-Arky, I'm very, very much happy and glad to introduce to you our special guests for the night. They'd be talking about responsible investing. So kung naririnig po natin, okay, yung ESG, no? What's this ESG investing? So here with us for tonight are these two fine and good-looking gentlemen like us, okay? So we have here...
si Jendi.
Of course, good-looking as well. Diba? Everybody's good-looking in this live stream. So we have here mga ka-Arky, Mr. Zaid Alrifai. He's the head of Architas Asia. He's been with the AXA Group for over 12 years and has been working for Architas, which is an asset management firm of the AXA Group, since January 2011, where he joined the UK office as the lead investment analyst for global emerging market equities and global fixed income. So he knows both sides of the market, fixed income and equities. He also has held a number of roles across the Architas business, including business strategy and UK funds COO, before moving to Hong Kong to launch Architas' Asia operations. Zaid is an honors graduate from the University of Manchester in Aerospace Engineering. Wow.
Rocket science.
It sounds
Yeah, rocket
better than it
science. Okay. And a CFA charter holder, very, very deadly combination, an engineer and a CFA charter holder, and of course, holder of the CFA UK certificate in ESG investing. So, ladies and gentlemen, mga ka-RK, please give a warm applause for Mr. Zaid Alrifai. Okay.
Thank you very much.
And of course, we have here Mr. Dexter Agcaoili, who's the wealth management segment director of AXA Philippines. Dexter is the wealth management segment director of AXA Philippines, and previously he was the investment solutions director of the same company while also being the country representative to Architas Asia. He has been in the financial services industry for about 20 years. So, yes, only the white hairs in his head belie that. Otherwise, you would think he's just here for over a decade or so. He also was a fund manager of Metro Bank Trust Banking Group when he began to handle investment portfolios of insurance companies, pension funds, and endowment plans. He also was the chief investment officer of AXA Philippines, was responsible for rolling out AXA Philippines flagship investment funds such as the Global Advantage Fund, the Global Dynamic Allocation Funds, and just most recently, the Peso-denominated Dollar Funds or PDDF or of AXA Philippines. So, ladies and gentlemen, mga ka-RK, please do welcome Mr. Dexter Agcaoili.
Hi,
Yun.
good evening, mga
Welcome,
ka-RK.
Dexter. You forgot to mention, Ren, si Dexter is also the stunt double of Dominic Ochoa.
Stunt double.
Yeah. Pagbabarilin na siya, di ba? Or pagsasagasaan na when the bus is there.
Mm-mm.
Okay, hold on. Dexter, go in.
So, welcome Dexter and Zaid to our live stream, and of course, welcome to all our subscribers and followers. And sa mga ka-arky natin, of course, we are live streaming over at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/wealtharky, and at facebook.com/wealtharky. So, if you haven't followed our Facebook page yet or haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, then please do so. We are also doing a special live stream on Kumu on my personal account. So hello to everyone who is watching over at Kumu. So let's just give a quick hello to everyone who is watching right now. So Marisa is here. Yeah, good afternoon mga ka-arky watching from Hong Kong. So kapitbahay, your neighbor right now is Zaid, no? From Marisa. Yes.
Hi, Marisa.
So the two of you can go karaoke later. Or Zaid went out.
We got
Anyway,
disconnected.
got disconnected. Hello, Sir JC. Good evening, Arky team. And si Dayan is also here.
Hello.
And si Jay, hello.
Pwede
Wait,
mo na
Zaid is
mag-Tagalog.
back, I think. Si JP is also here. Good afternoon. And si Paulo. Si Romero is also here. Hello, Romero. Herbie is also here. Ayan. I'll add Zaid. Wan Shanghao, good evening mga ka-arky, sabi ni Herbie. And sabi ni Romero, halatang may guest lahat nakapolo, looking good smoothing. Yes, of course we have to look as good as our guests. That's why we are in polo. So hello Romero. And of course, Kathleen is also here. Hi mga ka-arky at sa ating mga financial gurus. So to all our viewers right now, we will be discussing a special topic about responsible investing. Particularly, I'm sure you're interested to learn more about ESG. I don't know if you've heard about that term before, but I remember si Kim Franks, pero wala siya ngayon, no? One of our regular viewers asked about ESG investing several months ago, and this is our way of educating everyone about ESG investing, just in case you are really wondering on how it is, what it is. And we have, of course, Dexter and Zaid to discuss that. And of course, if you have any questions about ESG investing or about any of the topics that we will discuss this evening, then feel free to type it in our chat section. Ayan. Pag lumalabas si Zaid, pwede ako mag-Tagalog. Pero pag pumapasok siya, kailangan English tayo. No?
Pag
So,
lumalabas siya, ako kinakabahan eh.
kasi ikaw, Dexter, yung ano. So, good evening sa'yo, Ralph Ryan from Marshall Islands. Nakalimutan ko naman, saan nga ba itong Marshall Islands na to? Sa, ayan. biglang ginugel, Marshall Islands. Sa Oceania, o sa may New Zealand. Oo. Nako. So, good PM to all Arky. Alright, sabi ni Alan. Ayan. So, I know, Dexter, you and Zaid prepared a presentation for this evening.
Yeah.
Tama ba?
Yep. So,
Oo.
hi Zaid. Are you seriously
welcome back.
with us now?
So I'm very sorry. I don't know why it keeps kicking me out. So I'm very sorry. But hopefully I've changed devices, so hopefully it should be better. It should play ball.
All right. No problem. So, siguro we can start off our discussion for tonight with the presentation that you guys prepared, Dexter and Zaid. So, who will be sharing the presentation?
Would you like
Or do you want me to control the presentation and just tell me to just next slide? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so this is the presentation, and to give you the stage, siguro background. We'll just go to the background first. So, and we'll come back later after your presentation. So it will just be you and you, Dexter, and Zaid to talk about this. All right?
All right. So Zaid, would you like to start?
Sure. Well, I think firstly, I hope I don't get kicked out again. But firstly, let me say thank you very much again to our colleagues for inviting me. I'm actually very passionate about purpose and profit, and equally, might I add. And I think I think actually today's session is very timely because it feels like, and I can sense it actually even in the Philippines, ESG and responsible investing, or being sustainable as a person in everything you do is really the hot topic. And ever since the most recent COP26, many of you would have heard of, or Conference of Parties 26, that was held in Glasgow, where it brought together many global nations together and companies together to figure out how do we address the most fundamental parts of climate change. What we talk about in ESG really encompasses a lot of that. What I would say for ESG is that the way to look at it today is it is basically a spectrum, and actually the first thing is worth thinking about when we talk about ESG is that there is lots of different ways to be sustainable or invest responsibly, and actually that spectrum, if we go into the next slide, that spectrum is actually just giving you as an investor or a customer choice in the way that you want to invest your money. So this spectrum is a very good, or this table is a very good example of that. You have on one side traditional investment, which is effectively what we do today. We invest we're aware of ESG, but we don't necessarily invest as an objective. And then we go to the other side, which is philanthropy, basically like charity or really giving back. And then in between all of that is what can we do with our investment choices to invest either with the environment, so being socially conscious, or thinking about governance, corruption, things like that in mind. So I think one of these, which is exclusion, is probably quite popular in the Philippines. Is that right, Dex?
Yeah. Because being part of an asset manager before, we do get to have institutional customers or institutional clients, wherein they would include in the investment parameters certain provisions that would reflect their convictions. For example, if we are working with a foundation that are into nature, So, or environment, they would exclude certain companies that are doing harm to the environment. So that's one example of an investment fund that would exclude certain industries that is against their principles. So that's what we would call like values-based investing, which is quite popular given that there we are a Catholic country, and uh, religious groups would also be engaging into investments, and they would also reflect that in the investment parameters on how they would be investing their money.
Yeah. So I think the values based is probably one that you, like you say, then probably people are familiar with. So whether it's, it might be religious exclusions, which is I think the most common. So and then beyond that, the spectrum that we have is what we sort of call responsible, sustainable, and impact driven. And actually, the responsible element is also what we call in the investment management industry as ESG integration, meaning you will think about ESG concepts when you invest, like think about the environment or how workers' rights are treated, or how companies are managed and how decisions are made. You think about that in your process, but you don't necessarily exclude a company because of it. You're just integrating, you're taking it into account when you are selecting a company. And we could talk later about why that makes sense from an investment perspective. And that ESG integration or responsible is where most of the asset managers are operating today. There's then the next step, which is more around the impact that your investment can have on those dimensions we talked about, the E, the S, and the G. And that's really then being more explicit, being much more explicit about the impact or the objective of your investment, that you want it to tackle climate change, or that you want it to protect women in the workplace, and there are lots of investments that you can buy that can allow you to do that. Impact, and I think, is probably the area that most people would be familiar, I think, with, right, Dex? If maybe someone might want to buy a climate change fund, or a green energy company, a renewable energy company. But we can expect that in responsible investing, you might still see oil companies, for example, because it's of that. The integration is actually you pick an oil company that might be more likely to invest green or think about a sustainable strategy in the long term.
I guess what if we're to put that into context of investing into companies or stocks of companies, you mentioned about investing in energy companies, right, or oil companies. In responsible investing, if there's like 5 oil companies, you would somehow include ESG, or how that company impacts environment, social aspects, right, and the governance aspect. And you may still be invested in oil companies, but not necessarily all of them, right? Based on certain factors, or based on those factors, right? While when
Exactly.
we talk of
Exactly right.
when we talk of, say, impact investing, between an oil company, or let's say energy companies, between those that are using coal, oil versus renewable energy, you would want to invest into renewable energy that would generate power through solar or through wind, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. And actually, the oil companies that might be in the responsible bucket might be, Shell or BP, but we'll pick the company that is considering all of those, the E's, the S, and the G's. And so it might be that you pick an oil company that is transitioning, and that might be actually the way that you express your investment in responsible. And that's important, because the reality is that we also need to help companies that aren't fully ESG today to move across. And so we can't just omit them. It'd be too difficult, considering how much money and investment is already into those companies. So supporting them along the way is the other way to do it.
So we've been talking about ESG or ESG for quite a while. Perhaps we could go down into the definitions of each in the next slide, if you will.
Sure. So the E means environment. So the E means basically looking at factors that relate to the quality or functioning of a good natural environment, or habitat or biodiversity. So so when you're looking at E, you're considering companies that are either focused on renewables, looking at, I believe in the circular economy. So companies that focus on having a sustainable way of working. Maybe it's when, Coca-Cola, when company that uses copious amount of water. When you look at a company like Coca-Cola now, looking at how do they use that sustainably, so that they don't have a huge impact on water scarcity in the environment. So, for example, Coca-Cola now recycle a lot of what they do. And those elements are probably the most topical. They're the ones we talk about the most, the E, because it's very topical with climate change. And that we will consider those when we, select companies with building portfolios. The G is around governance. Actually, the G for most institutional investors is the most important, because what the G represents is that companies are run properly, that there's no corruption, that the incentives for senior leaders in companies is aligned with the company itself, so you don't get scandals. The shareholders, so us, the investors ourselves, are protected. We have rights when we want to vote in those companies. So that G is actually vitally important. And in fact, Architas did a survey we commissioned a survey across 11,000 investors globally. And in fact, the top factor across these three was the G, it was the governance, because people have seen many scandals in the past. And most recently, actually, Wirecard is another good example, which had accounting fraud. People really care about the fact that they want to invest in companies which are well managed.
Actually, here in the Philippines,
the final one is F.
Just to share, here in the Philippines, the good governance aspect is also considered by local investors. They just not necessarily say it's because of good governance. It's mainly on reputation. So there's a set of companies here, one of the top companies. They're known for the fact that they have really professionalized their companies, and it's being run by professionals and known to always be in running the companies so well. And because of that, foreign investors, open investors would always gravitate towards those companies, the stocks of those companies, mainly because of the good reputation that they have in governing or managing the companies that they have. So I share this because it may not be that obvious to most investors, but because of the brand name of that particular company being known to be well run, they would invest in it. And it's effectively good governance that they're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I think
it's basically companies you trust.
Yeah. I think the S is very interesting to really break down, and so that we get to really understand. Because once we get to really look into the social aspect, what it means, I think it would make more sense to an investor.
Exactly. And what the S is really covering, therefore, is people. Actually, it's that companies have for example, workers' rights in mind, and it could be that they have, and that means giving them fair pay, providing good health and safety for their employees, and a good environment for them to work in, considering product safety for not just for their own employees but also for people that they are selling products to. So really thinking about is that people aspect of, I guess, human rights, which is a key point that you will hear from the UN, which is linked to the that nice colorful mosaic that you see next to it, which is important. The S is important again for investors from an investment perspective, not just because it's good for people, but if you're a company and you don't think about good health and safety, that could be detrimental for your profit. So a good example I use is in 2014. There was a fire in Bangladesh, in one of the main factories in 2014 in Bangladesh, called the Rana Plaza in Dhaka. And what transpired was it was a manufacturing factory which made clothes. It had extremely poor health and safety standards, and that caused the building to collapse and killed many people. And since that point, a new initiative was established in Bangladesh called the Bangladesh Investor Initiative. It was launched in May of 2014. And what that did was require companies to sign an initiative which said that they provide adequate safety and adequate care for their staff. And as an investor, you then have security that the companies you're investing into have that in mind. And again, that's the S. That's a real feeling of the S, which is which I think companies are almost obliged to adhere to now.
I think one very good that you get to share with us the break down ESG. And I think one good way of really appreciating this is through a particular example or a concrete example. So here in the Philippines, there has been that drive for renewable energy. And one thing that we have really seen through time is that, say, renewable energy has been more mainstream. Perhaps you could share with us some insights that you have on it. Because one concrete thing that we experienced, like myself, have experienced is like doing solar. Like I have recently installed the solar panels for my home, and it's quite cheaper and far better, more efficient. So is that really just in Asia context, or perhaps you could share us some trends on that aspect?
Sure, no problem. Well, I think this chart is interesting. So the first thing to look at when you think of this chart actually is we look at it in the context of China. So, and the reason we look at it in the context of China is China is basically the biggest emitter in the world. So when we're talking about climate change and work that needs to be done, if China gets it right, then change can come. So, but that doesn't mean me in Hong Kong or you in the Philippines that we shouldn't also be making our change. But what this slide is showing actually is the magnitude of work that the Chinese have been able to do in order to shift away from dirty fuels to clean is significant, and actually it gives you a lot of cause for optimism when you look at this chart, which effectively illustrates just how much the cost of alternative energy has fallen because of the investment and the scalability of alternative fuels within in terms of manufacturing within China. And I mean, solar is a fantastic example of that. The cost has basically it's gone down by literally to a fifth of what it used to be because of the significant manufacturing that the Chinese has been able to implement over the last decade. And actually that's good for us because we can be main beneficiaries of that, as then from a manufacturer to them being purchasers of that.
Okay. So
our fossil fuel.
Yeah. Well, before we go into that, but what you were showing the previous slide is that how different sources of energy, the likes of solar and wind, has been really cheaper now and closely comparable to coal. And that now brings in the viability of having, say, power plants or let's say energy companies pursuing sustainable sources of energy. So one good example is
Exactly.
like AC Energy, which has been quite successful here in the Philippines, and now they're part of the Philippine Stock Exchange Index, which is a renewable energy company. And that is one good example of a success story of renewable energy here in the Philippines. And now investors are getting more familiar with such kinds of companies, and they are even investing in it. Now,
Yeah.
I think one of
Just
the
on that point,
usual...
actually, Dex, I think I would just add on that point as well. So, if anyone has read the Bill Gates book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, Bill Gates talks a lot about something called green premiums. And in that book, what he says is the premium for going green will act as an inhibitor for people to then move to go to clean energies. And when that turns over, which is basically happening now, then the potential for investors, users, consumers to move then will be immediate. And you can see that actually in the stock price of clean energy companies, for example, in China. Best performing sector in China last year, well over 100%. I don't advise to buy it now. I mean, it's in its juice, or you might want to buy it in a context of a portfolio. But it really shows actually how quickly, once you can break that barrier of green premium, just how quickly and how successful the transition could be.
And to that particular point that you made, and like what I shared earlier about having solar panels, the green premium back then is that, so having solar panels installed that would generate energy to supply what you need for your household could be so expensive, like could run in the millions. But now, cost has significantly gone down. It's quite affordable for like the middle income household to have such solar panels installed. And that's a concrete example of that green premium going down, where it becomes more affordable and more mainstream to have. I think so. With that said, one of the usual challenges for an investor to say, "Oh, why would I invest into sustainable investments?" is that they would say that I can't seem to reconcile doing good at the same time making profits. Right? So, uh, could you share the insights that we have with regard to striking that balance between doing good yet being profitable or making money?
Well, I think the bit to think about is if you are an E, an S, and a G, does that add to financial performance? Yes or no? And when you look at studies that have been done in the field, the answer is unequivocally yes. So, for example, the University of Oxford and Arabesque are an investment company, an investment research-based company. They did a review across 200 different studies, so companies, and what they found was with those companies who had better E, S, or G, or combined, that 90% of those companies had a lower cost of capital, meaning that they were able to get funding much cheaper than other companies. So in other words, people are willing to lend to them at lower rates. 88% of those companies showed better financial performance, and 80% of those companies delivered a better stock price performance when they had a correlation to the sustainable practices. So, the proof is in the pudding, really, when you look at, that study, there's countless amounts of them. And stock price performance is a very good example of that when you look at current stock price performance of companies with very good ESG characteristics. And actually, the next slide is a very good example of that, which is exactly the MSCI selected reduced fossil fuels index. If you looked at this index year to date, it would be one of the best performing, namely because of the two companies are in the top constituents, which is Tesla and Nvidia. And those two stocks alone this year have completely changed the market. And they are driving much of the stock price performance today. But this is another good example of a fund which can deliver pretty good downside protection. And you're in an asset class now which is receiving and generating lots of interest and is where direction of assets is going. Lots of people are saying at the moment that they are worried about investing in companies that have a high fossil fuel footprint because they will become stranded assets, which I actually don't believe will happen. But what you are seeing is that tactical shift, which is then moving towards very green and ditching the not so green. And again, this is a very good example of that.
Interestingly, when we were sharing this with distributors, and they would see the top constituents or the top holdings, and they would say, "So how the likes of Disney or the likes of Home Depot qualify in this particular universe?" And I would have to go to the extent of explaining how a company operates. Say, if they are into efficiency, minimizing wastage, that is effectively minimizing your carbon footprint uh, as you operate as a company, and or perhaps not using paper, but rather more of electronic mail and all. So we had to really go to this extent of explaining the small things that we do, the efficiencies that we do as an organization, for them to really understand. Oh, and when I start having that conversation, and they say, "Oh yeah," that then it becomes more concrete and more relatable, and they would say, "Oh," from then on, they could further understand why certain companies would actually qualify as a company being more sustainable or having reduced their footprint. So there.
I have another good example actually for you. So, which is sort of related more to people, right? So, a guy called Alex Edens, he works at London Business School. And he did a survey, or basically another study, where he looked at the Fortune 100's best companies, and what he was able to track was those companies which are the best places to work for, i.e., best employers, generated between 2.3 to 3.8 higher stock returns relative to their peers. So that's interesting, because, and when you think about it, it's intuitive, right? And that's the S bit. But if you're working for a great company which looks after its people and hires the best talent, of course it's going to do better in the stock price. And that's the S there, which is at play.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, of course,
So you're
AXA
saying,
is one of those companies. So
yeah, best place to work for. We recently got that award.
there you go. You see?
Yeah. Anyway, this has been quite a good discussion about ESG. Well, and good thing that you brought that up. Perhaps we could ask the other people like Fitz, Renzi, Marion, perhaps could join back. Naubusan na ako ng
Renzi,
Ingles.
you want to work AXA now, don't you?
Yun, ako, thank you very much, Dexter and Zaid, on that discussion. And it's really interesting what you said.
Slide.
Ayan.
Yeah, I was on the last slide and I was computing the overperformance. But yeah, more on that later. I was just surprised with that slide actually. I didn't expect that much of an overperformance.
Mhm. So what I got from your discussion, Dexter and Zaid, is that when it comes to investing, it's not just about investing on companies that have the best returns, and there's an ongoing, I would say, preference on investing on companies that actually have the ESG certification. Can you say that? Or those who
Oh,
pass the ESG grading system are those that are
or theme.
doing
We could do it
sustainable.
as theme ESG themed
Sustainable.
funds,
Yeah.
right?
All right. So, which I think is it makes sense because I've had clients who wanted to invest in the stock market, and they would tell me, I don't want mining companies. I don't want this because she's an environment advocate, no? So gusto niya yung mga companies na na pro-environment, no? So something like that. And I
Yeah.
think that's something to consider not just investing on any company but also yung may values na nakadikit, no? So
Yeah.
kailan ba nagsimula yung trend na yan, Dexter? Have you
Oo nga.
do you have
Okay.
like yung pagiging
So
cautious
way,
kung saan nag-i-invest?
okay, pero if we're to really look at it, no, yung dun sa spectrum na pinakita kanina, from being traditional or the usual conventional investing, the next step there is values-based investing, right? So
Mm-mm.
if you're going to ask when that started, that is like way back, um, as in Roman Catholic days, as in
All right.
centuries back. Is if we're to really look at history, because as early as say uh, the Muslims would have Sharia. They have their laws wherein they would also have certain restrictions or exclusions, right? The Catholics would also have such restrictions that they will not invest into immoral businesses or that's into gambling, etc. So point there is that it started there, and then there's that evolution as well. Certain foundations who are into the environment wouldn't want to invest the money that they have to finance mining companies. So that evolved through time. The E, so primarily E yung nagiging consideration
Yun
sa
yung mas
decision.
popular no, yung sa environment. But
Yeah,
for me, it's something new to learn na pag sinabing ESG, meron siyang social and governance aspect. So hindi lang ito yung mga green companies or companies that are protecting the environment but also companies that are being fair sa kanilang labor
correct.
practices and they are
Exactly.
running the companies well. And as Zaid mentioned earlier, some companies are also actively transitioning towards not just better governance but sustainable operations. So kasama ito sa sa ESG criteria natin, which I think is very good because of course as someone na I have my own values, I would also want to support companies who share my values. And I remember a friend, she's an environmentalist, no, advocate, no, and merong nanligaw sa kanya, may suitor siya who is not really pro environment and without having second thoughts, she dumped the guy because well, I
Oh,
want someone who share my values, who also wants to take care of the environment, who is willing to drink from uh, a metal straw so that they can save on plastic, no? So I think that's a good principle to follow also when we're investing. It's not just about the returns, but
so
also what
it's not just value-based investing, but it's also value-based matchmaking.
yes, yes.
Whether it is
Yeah.
aligned with
But
your
also surprisingly, you have discussed Dexter and Zay that you don't have to sacrifice returns when you are
Yes.
investing in ESG companies, right? Because uh, the last slide that you've shown, it shows us that they're actually making good money and investors can actually experience good returns. So can you explain that again, Dexter or Zaid?
yeah.
How big are the returns as compared to, let's just say, I just invest on the top performing company without thinking about ESG, or versus someone who only invest in ESG companies. Is there a big difference when it comes to the returns?
Okay. Let me first take a step back there with it because
Uh,
that could be a very dangerous question,
all
okay?
right.
If answered wrongly, okay? Uh, First, let's appreciate the principle of applying ESG factors in investing. Okay. Uh, I guess good question is, would you, between two companies, one being run well, having good governance, one um, doing under the table, hanky-panky, shady deals. Which do you think would perform well through time? And I
Of course,
think
the first one, yeah.
the first one, because the risk for legal challenges or perhaps
The cost,
the sustainability of the trust, the sustainability of the
the
business,
reputation as well.
the
The
reputation,
reputation.
exactly. And if that company needs to raise money, the one with a better reputation would be able to raise more funds than the other, right? So that the first is more sustainable. At the same like, if say we're talking of two companies, one is really known to be a very good employer, treating their people well, and because of that, we know that in studies, if there are really good people, engaged people working for an organization, they will really give more productivity, etc., as compared to the other one that would be undercutting the pay, giving overtime, too much overtime, not well compensated. Uh, of course, the first company would perform better, would be more productive, and that will translate to profits. So, and on the environment side, of course, if imagine if you are really wasting too much resources, or your operations is not sustainable, as opposed with a very efficient and sustainable type of firm, the sustainable firm would last longer and would be more profitable through time. So it's really a long game. So if we break it down to that, the question now is, between those two companies that I've shared on those E, S, and G aspects, which do you think would be a long-term bet? So the answer is obvious. And what we see earlier, what we flashed, is a concrete example of if we apply such filters or such factors in selecting companies. Yun, in our example, it's just an index, and there from the index we applied those filters. Then we got those good companies and checked their performance, and they really perform through time, because these are the sustainable companies that are really looking at good governance, treating people well, and looking at their impact in the environment.
Yeah, I like this
Mhm.
slide because it really shows that yeah, you can have profit because I don't know with Dexter, but like a few years ago there has been a very huge uptick on mining stocks, right? There's
Mhm.
that mining
Mhm.
adventure a few years ago. But for our attendees sa mga ka-arki natin, when you do ESG investing, it doesn't mean that you're sacrificing returns just for the sake of values. But if you would see here, no, most especially on 2020, um, this is the MSCI World. Just think of MSCI World as the global stock market. Okay, now MSCI World just look at MSCI World ESG. Okay, with that ESG flavor, and if you would see there mga ka-arki, meron kang ano no, you beat the global stock market quote unquote by about 5 percentage points. So that's a very in the world of stock market, that's a very good overperformance already. Maganda na yung return na yan na lamang ka ng 5 percentage points. And for all of the years from 2014 until 2020, that's I think that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. For 8 years, okay, for 8 years, okay, for 8 years, 1 year lang no na natalo yung ESG investing, which is like 1/8, and for 7 of 8 years, or 87.5%, yeah, you are beating the world stock market. So statistically speaking, it makes the good case for ESG investing. Hindi ka natalo.
Mhm.
I would just add there as well. I
Alright.
think the other thing to think about in is not just positive performance but also negative performance, right? Because
Yes, right,
actually,
right.
what you're avoiding is value destruction, right? I used the example of Wirecard. So in 2019, Wirecard filed for insolvency. They were basically a German credit company, and actually, when you look in the accounts, there was 1.9 billion euros missing from the accounts, and that effectively caused the company to be bankrupt. And everybody who invested in that stock lost their money. And the CEO was arrested. So what you're also trying to do is not just get the good companies, but avoid the bad ones. And the impact of avoiding the bad ones is real. And I mean, sometimes we forget, that these things can still happen, these scandals can still happen, but they're very alive and real, and having the right process in place to detect them is key. So that's a good example of the G, and I guess what you want to avoid.
Yeah.
That's right. And I think that closer to home, there had been some instances in which some mining companies were fined because of spills, river spills, or whatnot. So I think for the long term, if you do invest in companies that really protect the environment, then you have less fines for them, and then of course less fines would mean more profit for you and your stocks and your investments as well.
There's actually a good question here. Is there by Romero?
By Romero, yes.
Yes.
Yep. Let me read the question. So from Romero, is there any way to track those businesses which are assumed to be ESG compliant? Say a website, or how do they fare? There you go. So is there a website or anything
Best
where
to answer this in the global context and local context.
Okay, very good. Yeah. For Zaid and for you then. So is there a website or where or even the average Filipino can actually go to?
So I can talk from a global context. So the first problem is with ESG is exactly this question, which is the amount of reporting or information and data on ESG is still sort of in its growth phase, so to speak. It's being worked through at the moment. And one of the big issues we face is consistency of data. So a very good example, two big providers, two big index providers, FTSE and MSCI. MSCI was the index you saw, MSCI World. They provide an ESG rating on all companies within the global equity universe. And they have completely different views and opinions on what makes a company ESG. So the correlation between their ratings is about 0.5, 1 being the same and 0 being none. They're 0.5. So which is for two of the largest rating agencies in the world, that's absolutely humongous. So so it's an interesting one, the divergence that you get there. Having said that, what it means then is you sort of need to look at more than one, and then you need to use that as an input in your own decision making when you're looking at companies. So to answer your question, are there ways to track them? Well, you can look at places like MSCI, FTSE, Mercer. Morningstar has a Sustainalytics platform, which is a very good place to look at ESG rating companies. They all use their own individual, they're basically their own proprietary score. They all look very different. And so again, it's sort of, and actually at Architas, that's exactly what we do. We use more than one. And what we do is we actually use the two data providers we use is Sustainalytics as an input provider. We also use look at FTSE and MSCI data. But on top of that, what we do is we do a forward-looking analysis. In other words, what we do is we make an objective assessment, a qualitative assessment on the process, on a fund manager, or the people that are investing our money, to make an assessment on our own qualitative assessment based on the inputs we see.
Okay.
Thank you, Zaid. So what about in the Philippine perspective?
Local market.
Zaid, excuse me if I would somehow do it in a mix of English and Filipino. Right?
No problem.
Running out of English here. Okay. All right. So, for one is one good thing with recent developments is as far as regulation is concerned, like SEC and BSP. SEC has been more. They were able to adopt a framework or guidelines when it comes to reporting the sustainability activities of listed companies. So The same way as how we would analyze a company if we're to invest into a stock, is that we would usually look at the annual reports. Now, part of the requirements for listed companies is to have their sustainability reports. Okay? And that has been required by SEC. So, if, for example, you are a Filipino investor looking at Philippine stocks and you want to be conscious of how sustainable these companies are, so look into the sustainability reporting of these companies. That's one way of doing it. It's the same way as how an investment analyst here giving the inputs or reports his research to a fund manager who's managing, say, a fund that would be considering ESG or sustainability as part of the factors in managing the portfolio. So that's one concrete way of doing it. And to the point of Zaid, it is still early. Imagine SEC's guidance on sustainability reporting for listed companies was just in 2019, coming out from the Paris Agreement way back in 2016. So that's one side. The other side is, say, on the regulation side, BSP has also adopted a sustainability framework for banks. So if you are into, say, investing into bonds, so we will get to see in the near future as banks would also disclose the industries that they are borrowing. Would somehow give you an idea on which companies are into sustainability or meeting certain requirements or parameters that would warrant, let's say, a bank lending to them, or at least you get to exclude certain companies that are not that sustainable. Although we have yet to really evolve, but at least it's a good start. And if you are into sustainability as well, you could at least start with looking at the disclosures of these listed companies.
Thank you, Dex. So it means, well, in the Philippine perspective, though, we're in the demographic sweet spot, right? So, and the younger population are actually more informed nowadays as compared to the past year. So, I think this is a very interesting question or discussion, rather, because I think it's going to be an opportunity for the younger generations to make or on how they're going to make their investments in the future. However, my question is, so say for example, I'm an average Filipino. I'm just starting out in the investment field. So, did I get it correctly that I just need to refer on the information with each company as to which I would want to invest in, or I can go directly to our brokers, or I can ask a financial planner to assist me in checking on which companies would be possibly under the ESG kind of investing. So, I mean, to make it to summarize my question, though, how can you make it easier for an average Filipino person to invest in ESG, especially for those younger population who are more of they have more mission like type of investment, mission driven.
Okay, so Zaid, you can follow after me. Okay, so okay.
Umalis.
Okay.
Okay lang, sige.
Nag-video
Kaya mo na
ka.
daw, Sir Dex.
Well, for one,
Kaya mo na daw.
Nag-video ka to.
makakahinga-hinga ako. Okay. Well, for one, we do have what we call fund prospectus, right? So let's scrutinize the investment fund that we're going to invest in. So there are certain funds right now that would say that we are investing into sustainable companies, or it is its investment theme is an ESG theme. So there are certain providers right now, mutual funds or UITFs there. Now, while they are applying that locally, admittedly, given our constraints, when we talk of ESG, local investments, local stocks are not that broad yet. It's too narrow of a field. Parang, for example, if we're to look at the top 30 companies here in the Philippines, how many of those are really into sustainability? You might end up cutting it into just 15 stocks or even less, right? So it's also worth looking at what's available offshore or outside, like in global funds. And at the global context naman, one good thing with the European Union is they have adopted, or Zaid, feel free to help me here, when it comes to disclosures, or what we call what is known as SFDR, or Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, right? Or requirements.
right.
Zaid, I'll pass it on to you. It standardizes the requirements when it comes to investment funds, what would qualify as a sustainable investment. So, in having those standards, all asset managers would have to adhere to the level of disclosure that they're going to give, the information in terms of investment objectives, how they came about with their process of filtering from X number of stocks to this one, and they're considered as sustainable. And there's also a way of rating that they have institutionalized through the passage of the SFDR just this year. So, bottom line is really scrutinize the investment funds. What is the investment objective? What is their investment process? Zaid, good thing that you're back. Perhaps you could expound a bit on the EU's SFDR regulation.
Sure. So I think the regulation point is an important one, because what it's designed to do is avoid something which, a term many of you might have heard of, which is called greenwashing. Okay, and what greenwashing means is basically you invest in an ESG fund or a green fund, and actually it's not really any of those things, and you as an investor or a customer sort of feel shortchanged. And if you remember that spectrum point we talked about, what regulation is doing is recognizing that spectrum, so that actually when sometimes some investors invest in a fund which they thought is ESG, therefore is a climate fund and shouldn't be investing in, Shell or, the company, an oil company. But actually what regulation is doing is just putting it in a bucket. So in Europe, which is the largest funds market in the world, they categorize funds based on their ESG-ness, and that regulation, as Dex has kindly mentioned, is called SFDR, Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation. It will give those funds now a number, an article number, which basically tells you how ESG they are. And number 9 is the most regulated, is the most green, and then number 8 is one that ESG integrates. So number 9 would be impact on this list. Number 8 would be responsible, and number 6 would be traditional. Don't ask me why they do the numbers and they missed out number 7. I have no idea. that's Europeans for you. But actually, what's interesting is that's relatively new. That regulation came out in March of this year, so it tells you just how fast the regulation is moving, and also how important it is. And the questions we've just heard: how do you actually categorize an ESG fund? And for a lot of our customers, when they might see a score, it doesn't mean anything to them, right? So also what we're trying to do is sort of demystify that a bit and talk about what you're likely to invest into if you're in one of our funds. Actually, what sectors might you be exposed to, things like that.
Right.
I think to add to Genti's question about our younger listeners tonight regarding ESG is, correct me if I'm wrong, Zaid and Dexter, I understand that you are about to launch an ESG fund here in the Philippines, and I have 2 questions about this ESG fund that you are about to launch. Number 1 is this a US dollar or peso denominated? And number 2, what will be the composition of the ESG funds? What companies are you trying to look at when you launch the product?
So I got guidance from from our corporate communications that I will not be able to comment on such
You'd be in
questions.
line. So you'd be in line.
So there. But as those who are policyholders of AXA, they know that whenever we would launch let's say, global fund, it would be both available in both currencies, maybe a peso or a dollar currency fund. Okay. I'll just leave it at that for now.
So exciting, no? Kasi
both currencies,
of course the last time that we have Dexter here, we talked about global investing, and
Yeah.
during that time medyo matagal na launch yung mga global funds nyo, and I remember a few people on the chat sinasabi nila na oo, ang ganda nung returns nila dun sa global funds nung nag-invest sila, particularly sa AXA nga sila nag-invest ng global funds. And we're lucky today kasi meron tayong parang inside information na ang AXA would be launching ESG compliant funds, no? So that's definitely something to look forward to. And meron tayong ticker sa baba na to those who are interested to learn more about responsible investing, they can approach their AXA financial partner or yung kanilang mga kung may kaibigan sila na nasa AXA, and they can also check out itong mga links natin kasi it's already up on their website, yung bit.ly/AXA responsible investing, and dun sa Architas website mismo, bit.ly/Architas_responsible investing to really learn more about the concept of responsible investing, what are ESG companies, why it makes sense to invest sa mga ESG companies. And yun yung nakuha ko kanina. That's what I got from the discussion, that investing in ESG companies, it's not just because a matter of principle or value, but it actually makes sense because these are companies who are being run sustainably, no? They have good governance, and of course, for me, it's always good to support yung 17 Sustainable Development Goals ng UN, because I think in the long run, policies, economic policies, and the like would be in place to support companies that follow those, because that's really, I think, no, the direction that we must go to if we want to overcome yung mga challenges natin, especially pagdating sa climate crisis, no? So I think that makes sense. I remember like 5 or 6 years ago, I was telling people, particularly those who want to put up a business, I told them na it's a good idea to look at green businesses. And I told them that one trend that I'm noticing is that people would be going into cycling or riding bicycles, because I've seen it in other countries. There are bicycle lanes, etc. And it's something that I've seen really grow in the past year in the country. Ang dami kong kilala nagbibisikleta ngayon, and it's really an emerging, or actually a growing business in the country, yung pagiging not just pro environment, but I think it's also healthier for people to ride bicycles. So I think that's a simple analogy where this is going. Siguro ngayon we're all sanay tayo na nag-iinvest sa whatever company that we like or whatever company that we usually see, but going towards investing in ESG compliant companies and funds, no, it makes sense kasi we're early in the local sense, no, but because globally it's already happening, nakikita natin na maganda yung returns nila. So yun yung pinaka nakuha ko dito sa discussion natin so far. Ayan. So Renzi, what were you saying?
Yeah. In addition to that, habang swerte ko, pwede mag-Tagalog.
Pag lumalabas si Zaid. Ayan. Magtatagalog tayo. Pero andyan na siya
Oo.
ulit. Sandali lang.
Sabi
Sige,
ko baka
continue.
baka bumibidyoke lang 'to 'pag nawawala, eh. Ay naku.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I was saying, as I was saying, yeah, investing in sustainable business is really, I think it's a good marriage between long-term investing and long-term goals. I mean, you don't want to be putting your money in a company that's just there for the short term. So, of course, who are those businesses that would be there for the long term, right? So, this would be businesses that have, um, like sustainable sources of energy, who has their resources like their raw materials that are sustainable, meaning they just don't get their raw materials from like for like what 1 or 5 years or so. So you would be having their companies who would be there, who would be building their businesses on resources that would be there for the next like what 10, 20, 30, 40, or even like 80 years, or even to the age that you would be having your grandchildren as well. So that for me, I think is a good marriage for long-term investing and for a long-term investor just like me, no? And I think it's also good that you'd also be investing in companies that won't aggravate climate change. I mean, like for last year, I think that we've had seen the Philippine stock market go down because of typhoons, because of floods that have been ravaging the agricultural sector as well. So yeah, so the effect of climate change is here, and it really has affected the stock market and the downtick as well. So I think that yeah, ESG investing is really could really make the case for investors as well. And I think that for Filipinos, you already have been, like for example, if you've been investing in some conglomerates or in some select issues that are into windmills, into clean and responsible and renewable energy as well. So I think with that you're already doing ESG investing. You just don't know it. We just have a label
A
on
good
it right
start, at
now.
least. Yeah.
Kumbaga, before you don't have any label, but right now you already have a label. So yes, congratulations if you've been investing in those clean and renewable energy as well, and those companies that are into good governance. Having that sustainability theme for their businesses. So yes, you have been doing ESG investing already. You just didn't
Yeah.
know it, but congratulations.
Mm-mm. And
And
di ba
Actually,
mayroong parating na
I
IPO?
must add.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes, Aid.
I should just add as well. I mean, coming from working at AXA, so this is not necessarily the investments that we're offering, but AXA, I'm very proud of as a leader in the space for actually taking proper action on climate change. So, for example, this year, and actually you should think about the insurers you put your money with, right? So this year, for example, AXA has said it will invest 1.5 billion in forestry management. Okay, that is like one of the single largest investments from an insurer ever committed, and it's designed to avoid biodiversity loss. Okay, so we have two big issues. We have climate change, which is a real problem, and then we also have biodiversity loss, which is also a real big problem. Biodiversity is going to impact things like crops, food, water, and when you look, in Philippines, actually, is probably a good example of that. In the world today, 75% of our crops depend on pollinators. If we destroy ecosystems or don't protect them, then our food source is gone. It's the same for fresh water. 75% of fresh water must come from healthy forests. So that's where the investment of that 1.5 billion is coming from. And half of the world's population today depends on the nature for their livelihoods. Farmers, people that need, grow crops, whatever we all are part of this system. So also maybe sometimes you don't want to give charity, but actually the companies that you choose to work with as a consumer, think about that. We should think about that when we're making our own personal choices. And I think actually I'm very proud to work at AXA in that context, because they really are, they're really a leader in that space.
To share that part, like in what we do in AXA, we look at three main dimensions on when we talk of our climate strategy as a group. One dimension is how we operate as a company. Are we being efficient in the sense that we minimize waste. So that could be waste of in terms of usage of paper, or shifting from coming up with paper-based policy to like electronic-based policies that we are sending to our customers. It could be as simple as that, or the adoption of technology so as to minimize paper-based types of transactions. Uh, that's one aspect. And also we look at how we offer new products. Are we offering products that are inclusive? So on the social aspect of it, do we get to protect those um, segments of the population that would really need protection, uh, like maybe an SME or a micro SME. Thirdly is on how we are doing our investments. So how are we being responsible? So on those three aspects, that's how we are contributing to, say, our climate strategy. And it's a balance of those three. And if we're to relate it to other companies out there, for example, a power company who are um, generating using coal, at the same time hydropower and all. Say hydropower, I had this interesting conversation with an executive years back, and surprised to learn that those hydropower plants, right, would also take into consideration the forestry, like whether there's enough um, trees at, where the reservoir is, because it will keep um, the water level at a good level, and they would be able to um, generate power out of it. So point there is that if we're to now scrutinize, look into how will I get to identify which company is sustainable, which is not. You really look into their business, how they're functioning, how they are, whether they are following the rules or not, whether they're treating their people correctly or not, or whether they have good initiatives to the environment, or maybe not. So that's one way of really identifying which are sustainable, which are not.
Yun, hello. Yan. So sabi nga ni Romero, it requires a bit of analysis and getting or combining different agencies. And I hope the standards can be unified in the future. And yes, thanks for the answer. FTSE, MSCI, and Morningstar. So yeah,
Yeah.
no, and it really requires some due diligence to know which ones are ESG compliant. But of course, that's what mutual funds are for, because the fund
And
managers
fund
will do us.
managers are
Who will be,
for.
yeah,
We do it
who
for
will do
you,
the
so
research for us?
yeah, so you
Yes.
don't have to go to FTSE to I believe that Bloomberg also have their has their own ESG
Ratings.
analytics as well.
Okay.
So yes,
Reporting.
so to save you from doing your cross-platform own analytics, then yeah, you can actually have a fund manager do it for you.
Hmm.
Yeah, so again, for those who are interested to learn more about responsible investing, you can
Yes.
talk to an AXA financial planner today, and they're launching their ESG funds, so
Yes.
global funds. No, this is not just a
Uh,
local fund, but a global
is this a
fund. Dexter,
is
right?
this
No,
ano? Is this a fund of funds, or
it's either
would you be doing the
bawal
rest?
pa yata.
Ah, a
That's
secret. Okay.
Mm.
Okay, so just go to the ASO website if you want to know more about this fund. But yeah, I for
yeah.
Sir Dexter, around when will you launch this product,
yeah.
or
Oh,
is it
just give
still
us a
Oh, even
confidential?
harder. Wow.
Rush it
Zaid, can you give
tomorrow.
us an idea,
Choppy,
like
choppy. I
next
can't hear
quarter?
you. Choppy.
would this be after COVID-19, or
Indefinite.
Very good.
would you wait for the pandemic to end for this fund to be launched, or but definitely
I
soon,
can't hear
right?
you.
Definitely soon.
Choppy ka daw, Renzi.
I love it.
But yeah, but you have very, very interesting statistics there, Zaid. I really appreciate it. I mean, as an investment professional, seeing a 500 basis point overperformance, then you got me at 500 bips overperformance.
But again, Renzi, let's not look into those numbers, but appreciate the principle, okay?
I appreciate
Yes.
it more with the numbers.
Yeah, you do love the numbers. I can tell. But it's when we did our ESG study and we asked customers. Okay, we asked 11,000 customers, and we asked them what their motivations are. And in fact, the first thing they still answered as number one was performance. They want,
Yeah.
everybody. At the end of the day, we're all investing to build our financial wealth and our security. And so actually, it's important that it does well. I think
Yep.
that's recognized. And I think, but I think what we're seeing in the past or from evidence so far is good ESG companies can surely outperform. The caveat on that is this year, actually, when you look at performance of dirty fuels this year, they've done very well. And the reason for that is because of the huge global demand shift that we've had post-COVID. Basically, everybody has stopped going in lockdown and they now need to use power and fuel, and there's just, the batteries weren't prepared for it. So, and that's caused stock prices for those companies to go up. But I think that's probably more tactical than long term. And what we do always advocate is, I think as a company, we sell diversification, we sell long-term investing.
Yeah.
And on that basis, I think the evidence is clear.
That's right. I agree.
Yeah. And in the same study, we even asked why are they not, or what are the barriers for them to invest into an ESG fund? And the clear runaway answer there is that they want to know, they're not sure whether what they're investing in is really pure play ESG. So goes back to disclosure, because when we ask them what would make them comfortable, it's a matter of having the right amount of disclosure, communicating to the customer, having the right information that yes, these funds are really investing here and there that are really green. So very interesting insights that we got in the studies that we've had for the past year. And at least we know what are the right things to do.
Yeah.
All right.
You want more numbers?
Nako. So I hope you can come back, Dexter and Zaid, when
Yeah.
the funds finally launch. We'll have a launch
Yes.
party. A launch party dito.
Lunch
So,
party.
Lunch party.
magpapaano tayo, magpapamigay tayo ng policies. But sa mga ka-arki natin, to all our viewers, if you have questions related to ESG and the topics right now, then you can just type it in our chat and comment section. Of course, if you're watching this from YouTube, I hope you also subscribe to our YouTube channel to be able to catch our other videos and live streams.
Yes.
So it is our hope here in Wealth Archi to really educate you when it comes to personal finance and investing. And we're really excited actually for the coming months, especially next year, because we're thinking of giving you more intermediate topics such as ESG investing, di ba, Renzi? Yeah.
Right. So, thank you very much sa mga ka-arki natin. Maraming salamat. At ayun, meron naman tayong bagong natutunan with this live stream, bago sa pandinig. Okay, it's a new one. It's actually a booming trend right now in the investment industry. Although in the Philippines, we're quite should I say latecomer? I guess. Okay, but of
Medyo
course,
delayed pa, no?
but of course, we're here already. So thank you, Zaid. Thank you, Dexter, for giving us your time, your presence, your knowledge, okay, your expertise as well in investing and as investment professionals. So I think that our viewers our viewers have appreciated what ESG investing means for not just for their portfolio, but generally for the future, not just for them but for their kids as well.
Yep.
Yeah. So, Dexter, Zaid, any parting words that you'd like to give to our viewers? So, let's start with Zaid.
Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me. I'm really passionate about investing responsibly, and that's why, it's something that we advocate as a company, and it's something we are sponsoring very strongly. I think I guess some guidance is, I think look at my guidance is try and go global if you want to go ESG, and try and diversify when you're doing that. So there's a lot of options out there at the moment. There's lots of sectors that you can invest into. There'll be lots of winners and lots of losers, and I think that's why being diversified will be.
Nakat tayo. Dexter, I hope you can continue, and also your parting words. And
Okay. But I also am very passionate sa topic na to because I really believe in it. And if we're to really break it down to the essentials, the E, S, and G, and how it makes sense in an investment standpoint, as I shared earlier, it really does make sense. Now, um, I think with responsible investing, English na ako. With responsible investing, we can always strike a balance between profits and that sense of purpose. And it's important because when we invest our money, it's like you're giving your money to that particular company to pursue their operations. Right now, that is a powerful thing, and you are financing their operations. Now, are they operating in a sustainable way? Uh, that would be good for everyone. That's the impact of investing your money, and that's the importance of responsibly investing it.
all right, thank you, Dex. Zaid, do you want to finish your thought earlier before you got cut out? Ah, ayun, nawala na naman.
Ayun.
So, siguro,
Naganda internet natin isa sa Hong Kong.
hello.
Whatever reason, it doesn't like me today. My phone is behaving irresponsibly. There we go. It's not responsible.
Because it came from a brand that is not ESG compliant, probably. Just kidding.
Exactly.
So,
It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. I think my
yes.
parting gift was go diversified. That's my part. Go global, go diversified, spread your risk, invest for the long term. Definitely ESG. When you look at the studies, you look at the reports, makes a lot of sense. Trust
Yes.
your investment professionals who can review and I think look at the market broadly. So we talk about there's such disparity in the way that ESG is being rated. This is the time now where you need good active managers, people that can take stewardship of your money and your investments, and trust those professionals who know what they're doing. So, and I think if you do that, you're being an investment which is well managed, agile, dynamic, and flexible. So.
All right. Thank you very much, Zaid and Dexter. Marion, any parting words before we say goodbye?
Thank you for the comprehensive discussion about ESG, Sir Dexter and Mr. Zaid. And we're optimistic and we're excited as to when the ESG fund will come out, when will you offer this. And I know many of our ka-arkies will be saving their bonuses to try out and invest in ESG for the next year. All right, and that's all for
All
me.
right.
Until next week, mga ka-arky. Jendi.
Jendi.
Yes, ayan. All right, so syempre
Hindi ka
Dex
naman
and si Zaid na cut off anyway. But this really something, this very interesting. Although it's really barely new, probably I'm not sure in the global perspective, but here in our country, probably it's really new. But well, I mean the type of investing, but the companies probably have been existent for so many years. But now that you've discussed about ESG, we have a lot of options, especially our younger generation in terms of investing. And I also believe in what Zaid said earlier, that we have to diversify also, and we also invest in the long term, right? So there. Thank you to all our guests, definitely, and then to all our ka-arkies. Thank you for being with us no, for a bloody night. But it's a bloody but very informative and very promising no evening. So there. Thank you so much. Until next week. Yeah, Sir
All
Fritz
right.
and Sir Renz.
Renzi, yeah.
Nakamute ka, Renzi.
Nakamute
Yeah,
ka,
thank you,
Renzi.
Dave.
Ayan.
Thank you, Dexter, for being with us this night. Thank you for that very, very broad but meaty run through of ESG investing. I'm sure that our viewers and listeners have had a brush with ESG investing and made them excited already because, yes, it makes the case for investing not just to grow your portfolio, but investing for your future. Thank you very much.
All right. So, thank you Dexter and Zaid for joining us. Salamat mga ka-Arky. Pasensya na sa mga hindi natin nasagot na mga questions nyo. You have the chance to ask them again next week. So, next week we'll have our usual Q&A discussion regarding your personal finance and investment concerns. But I hope we were able to add new knowledge sa inyo mga ka-Arky, particularly about ESG investing and why it makes sense to do this. So, with that, thank you very much, Dexter and Zaid. Thank you mga ka-Arky. See you again next week. So, take care and stay safe. So, kita-kita ulit tayo. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our Facebook page, and of course, if you want to learn more about responsible investing, you can talk to an AXA financial partner today, and you can visit bit.ly/AXA_responsible investing and bit.ly/Architas_responsible investing. So, nandyan sa baba. I'll also put the links in the video description. So, sa mga late na nakarating, just wait a few minutes. You can watch the replay of this video both on YouTube and on Facebook. And if you know someone who would be interested to learn more about ESG, then you can definitely share the replay video later. All right, so that's it. Thank you, mga ka-Arky. See you again next week. All right, so bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.